Are you curious about how to spot red flags when searching for a mental health provider? Today, we're going to talk about just that. I'm Kimberly Bennett, licensed professional counselor of over 20 years and a homeschooling mom for, going on 6 years now. I'm also the founder and CEO of the Homeschool Counseling Network.
I've seen a lot of change, been through a lot of pain. Some things are not the same as they were a year ago.
The Homeschool Counseling Network was founded to help bridge the gap between professionals in the areas of coaching, education, mental health, and therapy, and in homeschooling families. We are here to help provide a multitude of directories to point you in the direction of professionals and providers who are equipped to support you on your home education journey. At our website, homeschoolcounselingnetwork.com, you'll find a plethora of resources from blog posts to digital downloads, podcast episodes, and videos, all types of resources to help you home educate your child. In this series, I have been talking with you about all of the different ways that you can help learn how to perform your due diligence when seeking out a mental health provider. To learn a little bit more about what due diligence is and how you perform that, I'll put a card somewhere up here in the video, and I will also put a link in the description box below. If you like this video, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button, so this will let the YouTube algorithm know that you would like to see more content like it, and it will also let you know when new videos arrive. So in continuing our deep dive into performing due diligence, we're going to go one step further today and talk about some common red flags that you should look out for when you are seeking a mental health provider. So seeing red, usually that is a sign for us that something's not quite right, something's wrong, or that it's something we should be aware of. Red is the color that tells us, caution, let's hold on, let's slow down, or even maybe let's stop. So let's take a look. If you are seeking mental health care or care from any type of mental health provider, whether they be mental health, medical, or otherwise, then part of performing that due diligence, part of that doing your homework, checking out their credentials, making sure that they're licensed, going even further with that is looking for some of these common signs that can say, hey, this therapist might be compromised, or this therapist might not be a good fit. So the first one, behaves unethically. Okay. All mental health professionals must follow a code of conduct. Codes of conduct exist for a reason. They are there to say, hey, these are the parameters within which therapy should function. These are the things you should do, and these are the things that you shouldn't do. And you would be amazed at some of the things that actually have to get written down and spelled out, and some of where the ethics violations come from. In Texas, every 2 years, I have to take what is, as I'm a licensed therapist in Texas, I have to take what is known as a jurisprudence exam. And what that is, it tests me basically on Texas law and basically on ethics. I also have to take a number of required hours of ethics continuing education units so that I can renew my hours, or so that I can renew my license as a therapist. Ethics are a big deal when it comes to our profession. They tell us this is what you should do and what you shouldn't do, and this is the kind of relationship that a therapeutic relationship is. While your therapist certainly should be friendly and certainly should make you feel welcome and comforted, you want to feel that when you walk into that office that you can tell that therapist anything and certainly not be judged for it. It is considered a safe space. By no means is that relationship a friendship. The relationship between a therapist and a client is what we like to call unidirectional. What that means is that I, the therapist, am there for you as the client. I'm there to be the sounding board that you can throw anything at me, you can tell me anything, and I'm not going to judge you for it. Do the same for me that I do for you. It's not that type of friendship. It's certainly not that type of a relationship. It is unidirectional. Anything other than that is an ethics violation that we call a dual relationship. Okay, so to define a dual relationship, I'm going to take you to my code of ethics, the American Counseling Association. So let's scroll down here. Okay, so look at that. It's right there under Section A, right here, Section A. So let's scroll on down into prohibited non-counseling roles and relationships. And this is where it starts to outline, and you can find this. I'll put a link to this below at it's counseling.org for American Counseling Association is under their code of ethics, and it is section 8. It is outlined and defined the type of relationship that you have with clients. So obviously from the definition in the video previous and the little clip that I showed you there earlier, you can see that dual relationships can be anywhere from a friendship along to the extreme of a relationship of more intimate, where dating a client or having a personal relationship or romantic relationship with a client, which is just a big no-no. So yes, that is a red flag. This may or may not surprise you, but the jurisprudence exam that I was just talking about earlier that we have to take every 2 years in Texas to make sure that we are aware of our code of ethics and that we are aware of our law. A lot of the cases, a lot of it is case studies when we read through it to make sure, oh, okay, so this was a case that was reported to the board. What violation was this? The majority of the cases that we go over are involving dual relationships. Therapists are human. We have human feelings and human emotions. And yes, therapists can make mistakes, but that still the burden of making sure that a relationship does not move beyond the therapeutic relationship falls on the therapist. There's an unequal balance of power when it comes to the therapeutic relationship. That's why they have us study it. That's why we don't practice in a vacuum, if you will. As therapists, even if we have been through all of our training, we have gotten our license, we've still getting our CEUs, we're still learning, always growing, we still, even if we don't have to have supervision, if you will, anymore, because we've moved past that stage of licensure, it's still not a good idea to practice in isolation and practice alone. We're humans. We have needs and feelings too. And if you isolate yourself too much, you might put yourself at risk for that. So instead, what we are encouraged to do in our profession is to consult with other members of the profession to make sure that we are, and definitely openly discuss any feelings that we might have that might emerge in the therapeutic process, which can happen. I have been very endeared to some of my clients before because I'm human, but I also know that there is that boundary that is there for a reason. So we don't practice in isolation, we don't practice in a vacuum, and the burden of keeping that relationship proper and in its proper respectful boundaries falls upon the role of the therapist. If you feel that kind of that relationship is moving out of that safe space of that unidirectional between client and therapist, that is a red flag, and that is time for you to see a different therapist. Okay, so the second example of behaving unethically is we're going to talk about the breaches of confidentiality. Now, there are certain times in a therapeutic relationship where we do have to break confidentiality. However, your therapist is going to discuss this with you before you ever, what those cases are, because it actually does vary from state to state. The two big ones that are probably going to come to mind and that you're going to be aware of are going to be if you threaten to harm someone else or if you threaten to harm yourself. That is called a duty to report or a duty to Other ways that we might have to breach confidentiality is going to be what we call as a mandated report. Laws for mandated reporting are going to be different for each state. But let's say that a minor has reported being assaulted or injured or abused, then I'm going to have to file a report for that. It is not my job to investigate. It is actually just my job to report it. I could be held accountable or held liable for that. So those are the times that I would need to breach confidentiality. Other times would be in terms of, let's say you want to use your insurance to pay for your services. Well, I do have to let your insurance company know that you're seeing me so that I can then bill them for that service. But again, in the informed consent, before you've ever started sessions with me, I've gone over all different types of paperwork with you in the beginning so that you know these are the times when I would have to breach confidentiality. Okay, but what is not considered an appropriate breach of confidentiality is, it's one of my favorite scenes out of the movie Steel Magnolias, where Dolly Parton asks Sally Field's character, "Why don't you tell me some of your sickest cases in this town, and I'll see if I can't, figure out who they are." And she says to Dolly, "I am not going to do that." And she's like, "Oh, you old fuddy duddy, you're no fun." Okay, so what the point is, at least good for Sally Field's character, she's like, "No, I'm not going to, tell you all of the dirt on everyone that is here in this small town. On a more serious note, there are ways that might actually be breaches of confidentiality that even the therapist might not be aware of. Things such as if you walk into their office, most therapists have, and I still have one now. I kept it for when I closed my practice. I had a white noise machine. When I closed my practice, it was right when my son was born, and it's great for helping infants sleep. So that's what I used my white noise machine for. But the point was, I share practice space with another therapist, so that if you came into my office and you sat in the waiting room, so that you couldn't hear whatever was being discussed inside the individual therapy room, I had that white noise machine playing. Most practices have that in some form or fashion, so that you might hear muffled voices, but you're not going to hear the exact details or contents of what is being discussed in that therapy session. That is private, protected health information. Okay, so the third thing that I wanted to talk about, misrepresentation. Okay, this isn't the third red flag. All mental health professionals must accurately promote themselves and their services to the public. This includes credentials, licenses, certifications, and degrees. That means even if you are, let's say you have an EDD, a doctorate of education in counseling, but you are wanting to promote yourself as a psychologist. Well, you can't promote yourself as a psychologist. You might be Dr. So and so, but you are not a psychologist. You are not a psychiatrist. You are not a medical doctor at all. You are still just a counselor. That is your highest form level of practice. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't use your credentials. You just cannot mislead the public into believing that they are seeing a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a medical professional. You have to actually represent yourself appropriately. Same thing with your licenses and your certification. With my license, I have to show my license to the public. I put my license number out there so that you can search for me if you need to verify that my license is up to date, that it was renewed. Because in order for it to be renewed, that means that I have completed all of my continuing education requirements and I'm up to date doing what I'm supposed to do on my end to keep my credentials clear so that I can be a better provider for you. If I were to tell you that my license was in good standing when it really wasn't, that is me misrepresenting myself to the public or to you as a potential client. And that also could lead, if I let my license lapse and I've not renewed it on time, that could be me practicing without a license. And that is a big no-no. That is misrepresentation. So I have to be open and honest about what I have experience in treating and what kind of experience I do have in treating a certain presenting problem or mental illness or disorder. We have specialties for a reason. And you want to make sure that when you are going to see a therapist that they are actually not just taking on clients so they can fill up their roster, but they are actually a good match to you because they have training in the area that you are seeking help with, basically. So going back to your due diligence before you ever set foot in your therapist's office, make sure to ask them what it is, and they should be asking you too what it is that brings you into therapy to see them, and so that you can in turn ask them if they have experience in dealing with the issue that has brought you to therapy to begin with. Even professionals, with multiple degrees and decades of experience are not equipped to treat all areas. This is where referral networks come in. Okay, so for the fourth one, these are going to be like two sides of the same coin. We're going to talk about oversharing and inattentiveness. Remember earlier when we talked about the therapeutic relationship and how it only flows in one direction, unidirectional? The therapist is there for the client, not necessarily the other way around. Now, in therapy, there is something that we call disclosure, which means that from time to time, a therapist may share little bits of their life in a way that actually might be very poignant or might be very helpful to the client at that time, especially if you are sharing a similar experience. It kind of helps promote the therapeutic bond, if you will. However, when the therapist is sharing at that time or choosing to disclose at that time, it is for the benefit of the client, not for the benefit of the therapist. But if it gets to the point where every time you're going in for that session, it feels like the majority of the session is all about that therapist, like, oh, they just couldn't wait to tell you this, or guess what happened to them next. And the majority of your time on the clock is spent listening about what is going on in that therapist's life, that's a red flag. Disclosure is a very powerful therapeutic tool, and it can be used with discretion, but used in limited portions, if you will, as well. It can promote the therapeutic bond, and it can actually help your clients see you more as a real person, because we are all are real people. It can actually also help them say, hey, I'm not going through this alone. Even my therapist has been through this. But if it starts to be where the scales are tipped more in the therapist's favor when it comes to sharing, that's a red flag. And that is time for you to seek another therapist. It's also probably time for that therapist to seek a therapist. Therapeutic relationships are collaborative efforts, and they're based on mutual trust and respect. Okay, so the other half of that coin, in attentiveness. Back when I was in practice, I never saw more than 20 clients a week. That may not sound like a lot, but for many practitioners, that's not a lot. For me, that was a full caseload. For many, that's just half their caseload. But I'll be honest with you, by the time I got towards that end of the week, I was probably not as good of a therapist with client number 19 and 20 as I was with client number 1. That's just being honest. That's part of me being human. And a lot of times that would also depend on how many clients I had seen that day. So to the best of my ability, I did my best to spread those out and to give myself enough time in between sessions so I could kind of restore, rejuvenate, and reboot, if you will, and process just a little bit, because I'm human, and that's a lot of mental load that you take on when you are a therapist. And as I said, even though there were times when I probably wasn't my best version of myself as a therapist by that 19th or 20th client of that week, I still endeavored to do my very best to make sure that I was attentive, or at least I did my very best to mimic it as best as I could. Now, having said that, burnout is a real thing. It is a real thing for parents. It is a real thing for homeschooling parents. It is a real thing in any profession, but it is especially big amongst the helping professions. And a lot of times it can hit a therapist before they even realize it. And it can start with small little details. This goes back with when I talked about earlier that even if you might be beyond the supervision stage, no one should practice in isolation. No one should practice in a vacuum. I was very, very grateful at the time to share office space with one of my very dear friends who was also a clinician, and we could kind of debrief, or as we talk about, this is not a sense of breaking confidentiality either if you go to supervision or if you go to consultation, because you do not necessarily have to give identifying information of the client. You just simply process what it is like to be a therapist and carrying this weight of all of the different things, because we genuinely care for our clients. We do. We choose to do this profession because we love what we do. Certainly not for the big bucks. The point is, we choose this profession because we love it, but it doesn't mean we are immune to fatigue. And then if we ignore that fatigue and it starts to grow into burnout. If you notice that your therapist is certainly not acknowledging when you say things that you feel are important to you, or reflecting it back to you, or talking back to you, or not even making eye contact, we can tell, because, like I said, 70-80% of our communication is body language. We can tell when someone's not paying attention to us, when they're not attentive to us. If you're a parent and you're watching this right now, your child can notice it. Hey, mom, watch this. Hey, mom, watch me. Mom, did you see me? Did you see me? Did you see me? And if you just keep saying, but you haven't looked at them once, they know. If a child can recognize it, so can you. So can you. It is actually okay for you to call your therapist out on that. It's okay for you to call your therapist out on a lot of things. That's what therapy is. It's that safe space for you to say, lately I've been feeling like when I'm talking with you or I'm sharing with you what's going on in my life, I feel like maybe you're not listening. Now, therapists can take that and give a reaction to that in a lot of different ways. If that were brought to my attention, I would hope that at the time I would be able to say, oh, okay, thank you for sharing that with me. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Let's explore that more. Let's talk more about that. Because the fact that my client was able to bring that to me, that was brave. That was really brave. And I'm human. So I can have my moments too. If you bring that to your therapist's attention and you're met with defensiveness, anger, or disrespect, that is a red flag. Okay, number 5, the last red flag that I wanted to talk about today: shaming. Shaming, shaming, shaming. Okay, there's a huge difference between conviction and condemnation. Yes, if you've come to our office with a presenting problem or you've got an issue that's going on, then it is part of our job as therapists to help you kind of look at all the different pieces of the puzzle and maybe look at some unhealthy habits, some unhealthy behaviors, some communication difficulties, some flaws in thinking that might be contributing to more of these unhealthy feelings that you're having and unhealthy behaviors that you're exhibiting. Yes, we're going to examine all of that, but that does not mean we are judging you as the person. We are there to help bring to your awareness some things that might need to change. That's the whole reason you came to therapy to begin with. Even if you are being gently confronted in therapy, it's not going to feel good. None of us likes to hold that mirror up to ourselves and take a look at the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful. It's not pleasant, not for anyone. But as therapists, when we have to do that, we still do it with total respect. With respect for you, the person, first of all, and with respect for the therapy process in general. We are not going to deliver it in a hurtful means to you. We are not going to deliver it in an angry voice. We are not going to deliver it in a way that is going to make you not want to ever come back to our office, I hope. I hope. But if you feel shamed, if you feel judged as a person when you go to your therapy office, that is a red flag. Okay, so this list is by no means comprehensive. I just wanted to give you a little bit of a tidbit to look at, some 5 common red flags to look out for when you are looking for a therapist or that might occur in your therapeutic relationship. If you like this video, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button. This will let the YouTube algorithm know that you would like to see more content like this. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again around here soon. Bye-bye.